Mongolia is situated between Russia to the north and China to the south, deep within the interior of Eastern Asia, far from any ocean. In the early 13th century CE, Genghis Khan united the nomadic tribes to establish a Mongolian state, which expanded under his successors into a vast empire encompassing much of China, Russia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. Over time, the Mongol Empire fragmented and declined, leading to parts of Mongolia falling under the influence of China and Russia from the 17th to the 20th century. In November 1924, the Mongolian People's Republic was declared, and the capital, originally centered around the main monastery of the Bog-Jegin, was renamed Ulaanbaatar Red Hero. The Mongols are one of the major ethnographic groups of Asian peoples. Their traditional homeland is located in Mongolia, a vast plateau in Central Asia that is now politically divided into the independent country of Mongolia, historically known as Outer Mongolia, and an autonomous region of China, Inner Mongolia. This region lies at the easternmost part of a historical migration corridor stretching between northeastern China, formerly called Manchuria, and Hungary. During the 19th century, physical anthropologists introduced the terms Mongol and Mongolian to describe a so-called racial type, despite the Mongols displaying a diverse range of physical features. Today, the Mongols are primarily identified as a group united by a common language and a shared nomadic heritage. Their geographic origins trace back to the northeastern corner of present-day Mongolia. To the east, the ancient tribal history is largely associated with Manchu Tungus-speaking peoples, including the ancestors of the Manchu and the Evenki. To the west, the region was historically influenced by the Xiongnu, also known as Mongolian Kunnu, and their Turkic-speaking successors, whom the Mongols eventually displaced and partially assimilated. Due to subsequent wars and migrations, Mongols today are found not only in Mongolia but also in southern Siberia and the Caspian Sea region of Russia. In China, they reside in the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, as well as in parts of the Hu Autonomous Region of Ningxia, the Uyghur Autonomous Region of Xinjiang, formerly East Turkestan, the Northern Tibet Autonomous Region, and several neighboring provinces. Ethnography and early tribal history of Mongolia. All Mongols recognize their shared ancestry to varying degrees through legends, historical records, and, most importantly, their language. While Mongolian dialects show more variation from east to west than from north to south, they generally remain mutually intelligible among Mongols. The Kakhalka dialect of Mongolian emerged around the 17th century. An earlier form of the language, known as Middle Mongol, is preserved in the Secret History of the Mongols, a major chronicle from the mid-13th century, recorded in Chinese transcription. The Mongols have historically been nomadic, but their nomadism involved the seasonal movement of livestock and camps between pastures rather than unrestricted wandering. Folklore and legends indicate that in pre-modern Mongolian society, livestock was regarded as private property, while land was considered collective property. Traditional Mongol society was structured around clans, with lineage traced through a common male ancestor whose name identified the clan. However, there is evidence of an earlier system based on matrilineal descent. Marriages within the same clan were prohibited, leading to complex marriage alliances and, at times, interclan conflicts. As clans expanded, the most influential families often claimed rights over ancestry and territory, while weaker clans remained subordinate. These subordinate clans retained ownership of their cattle and had their own leaders, but paid tribute to the dominant clan and followed its orders in migration, grazing, and warfare. Mongolian men were both herdsmen and warriors, switching roles as necessary. Raiding for livestock, women, and captives was a recognized way to accumulate wealth. By the 13th century, and possibly earlier, the Mongols had adopted a military system based on decimal organization, with units consisting of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 warriors. Commanders of larger units were assigned territories from which they collected tribute for the Supreme Khan and supplied their required troop contributions. The earliest references to people associated with Mongolia appear in Chinese historical records dating back to the Shang Dynasty in the 2nd millennium BCE. However, the first well-documented inhabitants were the Xiongnu, who emerged around the 5th or 4th century BCE. The Mongols regard the Xiongnu as their distant ancestors. The Xiongnu established a powerful tribal empire in Mongolia at the same time that China was being unified under the Qin 221–206 BCE and Han 206 BCE to 220 CE dynasties. After prolonged conflicts with China, as well as internal struggles, the Xiongnu Confederation eventually disintegrated. Some southern Xiongnu tribes surrendered and were settled within China, where they were gradually assimilated. Other northern tribes migrated westward, and by the 5th century CE, their descendants along with other tribal groups appeared in Europe as the Huns under Attila. By this time, these groups had become significantly more ethnically diverse. Following the decline of the Xiongnu in Mongolia, both Turkic-speaking groups and others considered by some scholars to be Mongols or Mongolic speakers emerged. There is no strong historical or archaeological evidence suggesting that these groups migrated from distant regions to replace the Xiongnu. Instead, it is likely that they had long been present in Mongolia as subjects of the Xiongnu and gained prominence only after the Confederation collapsed. Among the tribal groups potentially of Mongol origin, the most significant were the Xianpi Xiongbi, recorded in Han Dynasty annals, although they may have spoken Tungusic rather than Mongolic languages. Another important group was the Huanhuan Ruin or Jugan, active between the 4th and 6th centuries. Some scholars have linked the Huanhuan to the Avars, who migrated westward into Europe along the Danube River and were nearly eradicated in Hungary by Charlemagne in the late 8th century. Chinese records describe the rise of the Turks in Mongolia, whose name appears in Chinese as Tuju. According to legend, they were initially a subordinate tribe under the rule of the Huanhuan. The Turks eventually overthrew their overlords and took control of Mongolia, establishing their power base in the Orkhon River Valley in the north. The Orkhon Turks coexisted with China's Tang Dynasty 618–907, and their fortunes fluctuated depending on Tang's strength and weakness. During this period, agriculture became part of the economy. After the decline of the Orkhon Turks, the Uyghurs rose to power and became known as an oasis-dwelling people. The name Mongol first appeared in a tribal list during the Tang Dynasty but disappeared for some time before re-emerging in the 11th century. By this time, the Khitan Khitai, from whom the term Cathay is derived, had established control over much of Mongolia while ruling northeastern and northern China under the Liao Dynasty 907–1125. The Khitan, who were themselves of Mongolic origin, governed their Mongolian territories by manipulating tribal rivalries. Liao records mention an enigmatic tribal entity called Kamag Mongol-Ul's nation of all the Mongols, though it did not encompass all Mongol-speaking peoples. After the Khitan fell, their power in China was assumed and expanded by the Jukun-Jurcht, a Tungusic-speaking people from northeastern China. They established the Jin Golden Dynasty and altered tribal alliances by shifting their support from all the Mongols to the Tatars. The Tatars, known in the West as Tartars due to a medieval pun on Tartarus, Latin for hell, were Mongols but were not part of the All the Mongols tribal confederation, which was centered in the Anan and Karelen valleys in eastern northern Mongolia. Instead, the Tatars resided farther east and south. Although all the Mongols occasionally faced punitive campaigns, they had generally been allies or auxiliaries of the Khitan Liao. A Mongol force of about 50,000 warriors participated in the final battles of the Khitan Empire. This likely contributed to the Jukun shifting their favor toward the Tatars, who were closer to their frontier. Such shifts in alliances between distant and nearby border tribes were a common strategy in Chinese dynastic policies and successfully incited conflict between the Mongols and the Tatars. Before Genghis Khan's time, the downfall of the Liao dynasty led a defeated Khitan army to migrate westward. This force, led by a Khitan prince, was likely composed of various tribal groups. As they moved westward through Mongolia, they arrived in present-day Kazakhstan and established a short-lived but influential empire known as the Karakitai. Ruling mainly over Turkic-speaking nomads and city dwellers in oasis settlements, the Khitan leadership utilized its experience in nomadic governance and bureaucratic administration to consolidate power. The rise of Genghis Khan. Mongolia was in a state of tribal conflict and shifting power when Genghis Khan, originally named Temujin, was born around 1162, a date widely accepted by modern Mongol scholars. He belonged to a clan with a history of leadership. His great-grandfather, Kabul Kabil Khan, was once the most powerful ruler of all the Mongols. Temujin inherited several long-standing feuds, one against the Jukhanjin dynasty, another against the Tatars who had betrayed and killed a relative of his, and further conflicts among the Mongol ruling clans. His father was poisoned by the Tatars, and his family suffered hardships after his death. Among his enemies were the powerful Merkit tribe, whose people resented Temujin's family because his father had abducted his mother from them. As a teenager, Temujin was orphaned and faced difficult circumstances as leadership among the Mongols shifted to rival clans. Despite this, he demonstrated strategic thinking, using alliances and traditional Mongol customs to advance his position. He formed an oath-bound brotherhood Ando with Jamuka, who later became his fiercest rival, and gathered a loyal group of followers known as Kar warriors who abandoned tribal ties to serve him personally. Unlike the Ando relationship, which often led to deadly rivalries, Kar remained unwaveringly loyal. Many of his most talented generals came from this group. By 1206, Temujin's victories in tribal conflicts led to his recognition as the supreme leader of all the Mongols. He was given the title Genghis Khan, with Genghis possibly originating from the Turkic word Tengiz meaning ocean, symbolizing vastness and wisdom, though this interpretation remains debated. While previous nomadic leaders had invaded parts of China, none had managed to unify all of it, mainly because they left other hostile nomadic groups in their rear. Genghis Khan took a different approach, ensuring that he first consolidated his control over all Mongol tribes before expanding further. His initial goal was to subdue powerful tribes to the west, including the Naiman and Karaite, who had alternated between being his allies and enemies. He also secured control over northern Mongolia and areas along the Siberian frontier. Once his dominance in Mongolia was established, he turned toward China, where the Jin dynasty controlled the northern regions, while the Shi Western Xia state occupied parts of present-day Inner Mongolia and northwestern China. The southern half of China was ruled by the non-southern Song dynasty, which was expanding into Southeast Asia. Diplomatic maneuvers, alliances, betrayals, and wars were common among these states. Between 1207 and 1215, Genghis Khan launched deep incursions into northern China. He capitalized on resentment among the Khitan people, whose Liao dynasty had been overthrown by the Jin, turning them into valuable allies. In 1215, his forces captured and plundered Zhongdu, modern Beijing, forcing the Jin emperor to flee southward. However, Genghis Khan recognized that it was too soon for a full-scale conquest of China. He withdrew to Mongolia, assigning his general, Mughali, to weaken the Jin through ongoing raids, while he himself turned westward. After eliminating the Naiman, the last powerful Mongol tribe, their leader's son, Kublai, fled to Karkitek, a kingdom covering parts of present-day Kazakhstan and Xinjiang. Kublai overthrew its ruler and imposed Buddhist rule, persecuting the Muslim majority. This gave the Mongols an opportunity to intervene. When Genghis Khan's general Jib defeated Kublai, he proclaimed religious freedom and prohibited looting and massacres, demonstrating that Mongol brutality was a calculated strategy rather than random savagery. By conquering Karakitai, Genghis Khan gained access to Khwarezm, a wealthy region along the Amu-Darya, modern Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. This not only provided an alternative expansion route to China but also ensured that no rival nomadic power could rise behind him. Once this was secured, he turned his attention back to China, while delegating campaigns in Russia and Eastern Europe to his generals and sons. Before committing his full army to China, he first dealt with the prosperous Xia state. It was during this final successful campaign in 1227 that Genghis Khan passed away. The successor states of the Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan had already arranged his empire's succession before his death. He divided his territories among his four sons, each receiving a vassal kingdom. His eldest son, Shiji, was granted land stretching from the Yenisei River and the Aral Sea to the westernmost extent of Mongol conquests. The second son, Shagatai, received Kashgaria, modern-day southern Xinjiang, and most of Mavranikar, the region between the Amu-Darya and Syr-Darya rivers. Gide, the third son, was allocated western Mongolia and Tarbagatai, now part of northwestern Xinjiang. The youngest, Tolui, inherited the Mongol heartland in eastern Mongolia. In 1229, 2 years after Genghis Khan's death, a Grand Mongol Assembly formally declared Gide as the Great Khan Kagan. This division aligned with traditional Mongol customs, where the eldest son would establish his own independent camp upon reaching adulthood, while the youngest son remained with his parents, inheriting their home. Ji's placement farthest from the Mongol heartland was strategic, as he had a strained relationship with his brothers, who questioned his legitimacy. The selection of Gide over Chagatai as the Great Khan followed wartime traditions, where the most capable and widely accepted son was chosen. Following this initial division, further fragmentation was inevitable. Under Beta, Ji's successor, the Golden Horde emerged, dominating the Russian principalities and collecting tribute. Over time, the Mongols of the Golden Horde became increasingly influenced by the Turkic population, leading to the adoption of the Turkic language and Islam as the primary religion. Due to its power base in the Kipchak steppe, the Golden Horde was also known as the Kipchak Khanate. It played a role in strengthening the Grand Duchy of Moscow through taxation but was eventually defeated by a coalition led by Moscow at the Battle of Kulikovo in 1380. Although the Golden Horde retaliated by sacking Moscow 2 years later, its decline accelerated due to internal struggles and invasions by Timur Tamerlane from Turkestan. To the east, two additional Mongol Khanates formed, the Chagatai Khanate and the Ayal Khanate of Iran-Persia. The Chagatai rulers often clashed with the Great Khans and the Ayal Khans, asserting their seniority based on lineage. In contrast, the Ayal Khans recognized and supported the authority of the Great Khans. Unlike the Golden Horde and the Chagatai Khanate, which maintained strong nomadic traditions, the Ayal Khans and the Yuan rulers in China became increasingly influenced by settled civilizations. This led to administrative power shifting from Mongol hands to local bureaucrats. The Ayal Khanate's greatest ruler, Hulagu, a brother of Kublai Khan, aligned with the Yuan dynasty against the Chagatai and Golden Horde Khanates. In 1240, Genghis Khan's grandson, Godin Khan, invaded Tibet and established a patron-priest relationship with the Sakya Pandita, leader of the Asaiskayapa school of Tibetan Buddhism. In exchange for religious guidance, the Sakya Pandita was granted political authority in Tibet. And that wraps up our journey through the rise and fall of the Mongol successor states. From Genghis Khan's grand vision to the powerful Khanates that shaped history, the Mongols left an undeniable mark on the world. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments which Mongol ruler or event fascinates you the most. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.